Well, here we are, bright and early, not early enough, but as early as I want to get up on this Wednesday. What is it? The 9th? October 9th. Oh, that's hot coffee. And that's not dark roast, that's pike. That is pike. I don't like the pike. It messes with my stomach. We're about to go through a big transition. Seems like everything's going through a transition. Man, that pike's terrible. I specifically asked for dark roast, and they gave me pike. It says dark roast on the outside, and pike has that distinct, disgusting flavor, you know. Someday people will kill over a cup of pike coffee. Those days are fastly approaching. We have reached that area of the inept zealot, feckless zealot, beginning and starting back at the abecedary, the ones who learn, well, meaning one who learns ABCs, right? Learning the rudimentary things once again as civilizations and societies topple over and the entire thing begins again. Why does it begin again? You know, it would take countless amount of time for any nomads to collectively come back to a place where, like, I think people don't really get the fact that we can lose our language and our ability to formalize a community, socialize in a structural, integral sort of way. Most people, in other words, don't really think, what is the goal? What am I doing today? They just go along and conform with the system. And that's been the theme. And you couldn't get closer toward the ultimate conformism until you're actually pointing a camera at yourself in the solitude of your own time. And most people aren't getting paid for this. Most people aren't getting that many likes. If it's more of a cathartic type emotional drive that they're going for, most people don't want to show their face because, let's face it, when you look around, most people don't have a lick of muscle on their body. They're obese or overweight, but most definitely, you know, myself included, saggy skin. The mark of eating the same low food quality you can see generationally. So there are some YouTube channels that will display this, where it's like, look how healthy people were in the 1970s. Like, no, they were just eating whole food sources. You know, they were eating real butter. They were eating real whole milk. They were eating real vegetables. They were getting in. I mean, I would estimate just off the cuff that we're not even getting in a fifth or a quarter of the nutrients that we did hitherto just 40 or 50 years ago. So in other words, we are a different human. We're a different breed. Our offspring's going to come out with less health, less vitality, less bolstered up favor from the beginning. And we see that all too prevalent with a lot of these anxiety disorders, brain imbalances. And I'm telling you, the thing that I'm going back to, and it's a little ironic, but not. Everything's ironic, right? The way that I ordered my 5-pound container of protein powder And all last year, all the walking I did, really had the hardest time going back on an all-protein diet where I could fast for long periods of time. It can't be for superficial purposes. It needs to be an adherence toward orthomolecular nutrition. There's a focus on amino acids. As far as looks go, unless you've got a real stockpile in your body of nutrients, stored nutrients, you're going to end up looking quite gaunt, and it's not going to fare well as far as the initial appearance. And you're going to need to take in the full spectrum of vitamin B's so that the synergistic response of the amino acids can go to work. The book is, again, I've cited this many times, but it's old school, and there haven't been a lot of updates in this area. There have in the ways of amino acids and controlled group programs and infrared reliability. But as far as there being an agenda for learning's sake, and a revolutionary way of adopting will-based protocols, people are looking for the magic pill to this day. They're looking for the shortcut. They're looking for the way, and a lot, like this Ozempic and all these other supplements, drugs. Your body doesn't need that. But trimethylglycine, trifold, that's something that I'd like to see more studies done on as far as long-term use and the use of things like this that are supposed to bolster your own muscle skeletal density, or the amount of the mass, your own specific muscle mass. Then you need to create a blood supply. So you got your vitamin B's, your B6, your B12, your B1, the whole B family, but mainly like paradoxin and B12, and you've got vitamin C, and there are different types of vitamin C, and you don't just want to take the cheap stuff, but I would say the more natural type vitamin C's, they're going to cost you. I've got vitamin C right here, not the very best, but I digress. And then you've got to take in some minerals, a trace mineral supplement in order to get in your base minerals. And then you've got everything that you need in order to most effectively synergize these amino acids. It's something that Billy J. Saley says in Heal with Amino Acids and Micronutrients, or Nutrients, is that amino acids compete with one another. So when you're taking amino acids on their own, especially in the morning, particularly in the morning, you kind of want to split your day up with what you eat. At least bifurcate your nutrition focus in the day. Like around 2 p.m., you make that shift between 1 and 3 p.m., right? It really depends on where you're coming from and what your goals are and what you do for a living and how early you get up, and if you're even able to access and get the most out of your slow wave sleep through your chronobiology. It's all dictated to by your insulin balance, right? And so what I always recommended to clients, and what I did myself, and I still do that to some extent because I really don't eat like breakfast most days, but when I have protein, I will adhere to the protein, and that is that carbohydrates and fat will shunt your growth hormone release, and you can, as well as amino acids, because you're affecting your insulin levels. But if you go through the back door, as I say, and you do less, more frequently, more often, you're not going to see these extremes, right, take place as far as the effects on your endocrine system. And you're just slowly easing your way into a protein fast, right? And so that's what I will be beginning to do as I transition back into all training all day. Of course, the first thing that I do is I start to walk. This time around, I'm going to be doing a lot of stretching. I'm going to try to capture most of that on camera and describe what I'm doing as far as the physical sciences, the biomechanical sciences of it, anatomically describing what muscles are have tightness, why they have tightness, why I'm releasing them, and why that's of great benefit as far as synergistic muscle dominances are concerned. How that all leads back to the spinous system and the nervous system, and how having a lighter weight mass, overall body weight, even though one looks so thin and skinny and gaunt, is of great benefit. And how we're in this reactive state where we're existentially afraid of the next move. We're afraid of the next thing that happens. But you got to understand that this adherence toward amino acids and protein and taking in more water, there's a preparatory aspect to it, and it takes a lot of time. Why do it? I'm not making any claims here, but I've trained hundreds of clients, and throughout my training career, I pretty much adhered to what I called the 3-day cycle, where I would bolster with the most high quality, best available sources of carbohydrates. And then I even called it the snake diet at one time, long before somebody else had coined their diet the snake diet. This is going back 15, maybe even 20 years ago. And so we stockpile on carbohydrates. We take in as much carbohydrates as we can in the forms of really high quality vegetables, high fiber sources of complex carbohydrates. We base that on 0.45 times your body weight in pounds, and the thermic effect of food. We also base that on our hunger. Once you've got a full glycogen load, you're no longer going to crave a carbohydrate. That's the beauty of how we work as far as our appetite goes. And then the next day, we tap into that energy and we go on nothing but protein and supplements by themselves. You got to be really careful with the supplements, because supplements, vitamin supplements, minerals, they prompt a metabolic command over your digestive system. So you can really get yourself into trouble where you're so hungry that you just can't handle it. And that's where the walking comes in, is that there's a rerouting of that hunger mechanism. And all of this leads to a transcendence. So you're doing this to bolster your health. You're doing this for anti-aging initially. You're doing this to clear the gunk out of your system. You're doing this to fortify your ability to exercise free will. You're doing this so that you can build up the mechanism of power and control over your hunger, taming the beast, as it were. But what happens, the beauty of it, is one becomes very solemn and philosophical, and you're also doing this, you're staying alone for the most part because you're in a hell of a bad mood. You really don't want to see anybody, and no one really understands the pain and the effort that you're going through. So you end up in your solitude, going into these sort of micro soliloquies in your mind, and The amino acids are unlocking aspects to yourself. You may even go through this sort of cathartic response with, in terms of like sort of a psychological breakdown where you're remembering things, the wiring, in your brain and your nervous system seem to be not only just more a faster, quicker, more expedient response, right? Because you're smaller, because you've got the amino acids, because you've got these excitatory neurotransmitters, because you've got all the nutrients available, and because you're being very specific with your cause, with your aim, with your goal, with the attributes of what you do in a day. But you will have problems sleeping because that is part and parcel to your serotonin and your dopamine. And so the goal is, just like it used to be back in the day and just like it should be now, is we should be so exhausted from a day's work that we fall to sleep and have undoubtedly some of the best sleep that you'll ever have from hard work. And this is what these luxury items like coffee and cigarettes and things like this, man earns his tobacco, his bowl, his pipe at the end of the day, or his singular cigarette, his rollie from natural tobacco, right? And or is his chew, right? And people weren't sitting around doing this all day long, right? In a nervous anxiety habit, right? So we turn more toward amino acids and we look at the pure response that our bodies have to those specific amino acids. And we're also using amino acids that we normally wouldn't, because we're going, if you're on this for 3 to 5 days or longer, I used to push it into weeks, and I'm going to again. And I'm going to be capturing it here. I'm going to be capturing the changes that I go through from a physiological standpoint. And I've never heard or seen anybody doing this. In fact, it seems to be antithetical to what everybody's doing right now, but it seems to be the perfect aim, the perfect cause, for the perfect entry point to do something like this, because it is sparking a pulling away from society. It is almost putting you into the mind state of a monk, and it's doing it as a cheat code in a very quick, expedient sort of way, where when you're doing this for your first month, if you're really adhering to it, and I'm not recommending this to anybody. This is something that I'm doing, and I'm definitely not recommending it, but I am going to be studying and researching and reminding myself of how I stack the amino acids and the nutrients, how I'm taking in more fat soluble vitamins at certain times, how I'm bolstering up long before what's his name, I haven't watched him in a while, I just can't remember the guy who's doing the anti-aging thing, Brian Johnson. I was doing the EVOO, the extra virgin olive oil, 15-20 years ago. But what I found is that focusing, even way back then, is that focusing on omega-3s, when you're talking about the double bonds, right, was the most important thing that you could possibly do. But as your stores, your reserves, and I'm not saying that you have stores and reserves, there's a perishability with essential fatty acids, but we live in a time where, like these fish oil tabs that I have that haven't been refrigerated, those things went rancid really quickly back in the day. And they are not, I've had them for some months now, maybe a month, and a little over a month. And I'm probably about to require another order. You got to be careful because there are a lot of studies. If you look at Donald Rudin, I think that he did his flax studies on bipolar, unipolar, and people with disorders such as that, with essential fatty acids, and would have great success. But after about 5 or 6 weeks, he'd see a total turnaround where these certain established quantities weren't good enough. Well, now you can walk into any Whole Foods and get what you need. The main issue, I think, has always been a lack in work by the individual. The way that you fix yourself is not being sedentary. You have to get your body back into walking. You have to get your body in motion, energy in motion. And so that's why the adherence of 6 to 8 hours of walking every single day was what I was doing all last year. And that's what it's going to go back into. And on top of that, I will stack my training onto that and hopefully be able to transition that toward my walking 3 to 4 hours a day, and then working for 6 to 8 hours per day soon after.